Hello, welcome to a special series of Art Pays Me interviews with the winners of the 2024 Creative Nova Scotia Awards. Presented annually by Arts Nova Scotia and the Creative Nova Scotia Leadership Council, these awards celebrate artistic excellence across Mi'kmaq. Award categories are as follows: Creative Community Impact, Prix Grand Prix, Established Artist, Emerging Artist, Black Artist, Indigenous Artist, and finally the Portia White Prize that is given to a person who has made outstanding and significant contributions to Nova Scotia's creative community over a sustained career, much like the incredible woman that the award is named after. The winner will also choose an emerging artist or cultural organization that they feel deserve recognition. Collectively, the awards are worth $75,000. Visit artsns.ca to nominate your favorite Nova Scotia artist or nominate yourself. This series would not be possible without the fantastic production work of Heist and Kiki Beats. On this episode, I spoke with Emerging Artist Award recipient Jack Wong. We talk about Jack's process for producing children's books as an author and an illustrator, the meditative benefit of shooting the same basketball shot over and over, and how the lessons learned from that repetition impact his art practice. We also talk about why having a certain amount of conflict with creative collaborators can actually be a good thing. I hope you enjoy this episode with Jack Wong. So, hey, how you doing? Thank you for letting us in your studio space today. This is a beautiful space, by the way. Like, I love it. The art all over the place, man. But before we get into it, please, if you could state your name, your pronouns, and actually what you do, your creative discipline.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. My name is Jack Wong. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a children's author and illustrator.
Amazing. So we were talking a little bit before, and I should know better as a dad who had a lot of children's books around me. This whole process of like the author and the illustrator, I always just assumed they were separate, and you do both. How does that play into the process for you?
I think it was good just to know from looking at children's books that are out in the world that there are people who illustrate and write stories and do both sides of that equation. And, throughout, recent books that have become classics and have kind of stood the test of time, many of them have actually been written and illustrated by the same person. So that was just a bit of a blueprint when it came to thinking about my interests. I like to draw. I've also, from a young age, loved to make up stories and tell stories. So there are kind of different paths to wanting to become a storyteller. You could be a filmmaker, you could be a novelist, you could be a podcast host and tell stories that way, real stories about people. And children's books are kind of like a way that you can kind of make a very small contained story and be kind of the director in every aspect of it. So you kind of bear the burden of doing all that. You don't have actors and cinematographers and everything. You do all that yourself, but at the same time, it's you can kind of get into your own little world and kind of create the world in your own hands and in your desk. So it's a nice kind of way of escaping into an artistic practice as well.
So it's funny you say that because we were looking at some of your art, and like this one in particular, I commented on the lighting, but it's not lighting, it's literally just an illustration, right? But it's very cinematic in the way that you put that work together, and like all of these, your technique is excellent and does really capture or make you feel like you're getting immersed into sort of an interactive world, if you may. Is there a point? Like, I mean, you did mention seeing that there is this path with people that do both, but do you really feel like you've always just wanted to do this in some kind of capacity anyway?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, as I was saying, I've always wanted to be an artist, and I
Yeah.
knew that from a very young age. Um, but yeah, it took a while to actually arrive at making children's books,
Yeah.
and there was kind of lots of different moments along the way.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you've got kind of an interdisciplinary background, which is very interesting. And speaking of which,
Mm-hmm.
you and I both went to NASCAD. Is NASCAD what brought you to Nova Scotia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And that program you were in, you told me you were in the interdisciplinary program, and I find it interesting. Like, I'm curious about your process. Do you start physical with the hand stuff and then get into like a program and start manipulating things digitally?
Mm-hmm.
How does your process work for you?
That's an interesting question. Because a lot of it happens, as you can see on the walls here, on paper with some paint or pastel.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of digital manipulation that happens afterwards. A lot of collaging, a lot of correcting mistakes,
Yep.
or swapping out one face for another when it doesn't look quite right. And there's this thing in picture books where on the copyright page it says the artist used crayon and pastel, or these artworks were created digitally.
Yeah.
And my first couple of books were predominantly pastel, so they were pastel drawings, and they appear as pastel drawings. So that was the medium I listed, but it kind of ignored a lot of tweaking and part of the process that happens digitally.
Yeah.
And over time, I felt that not out of the perhaps dishonest aspect of it, but out of the fact that whenever I look at a children's book, I flip to that page and I want to see how the artist made that work. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's like it's like I can't even figure out how they drew this picture. And if they list incomplete information, then I'll never figure it out. It's like that can't be done like with a pencil, and I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
So in service of giving that potential curious artist or an aspiring artist more information about how this art was done, I decided that digital collage, digital manipulation, Photoshop, those are all super important things to list as part of the medium for the book. And I'll also take pride in the fact that that's not just photoshopping the derogatory way, but that's part of the process. And that's the way we're all moving towards making art, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult not to. Like, I don't do a lot of illustration work for clients, but I have had a situation where I did a piece, and the same thing. I painted all these different individual pieces, and then I just photoshopped them together to make one piece. And the client loved it and were like, "Can I buy the original from you?" I'm like, "It doesn't exist."
I've said that to people too. Yeah, this does not exist in the real world. So speaking of that, it's opening more opportunities rather than being adulterating the artistic process in some way, because the way that your piece turned out couldn't have been done any other way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just the way it works these days. So you've got a mini basketball hoop. So this is something that's interesting.
Okay.
We talked about the idea of shooting and repetition being meditative. Does that impact your creative process at all?
Yeah, so you and I both are big basketball fans and love, going to the court and shooting. I was telling you before that part of what I like is the way that practicing a shot is like a golf swing.
Yep.
So I do that to be meditative rather than to go into a game and the competitive aspect. I'm not sure if it reflects the artwork in any specific way, but one thing that's really interesting is that learning two things at the same time was really interesting. So I started learning children's book illustration, which is separate to the time I spent at NASCAD learning to draw or paint. Learning about the conventions of children's book illustrating and writing, but also just learning that the workflow, the process. There's so many things that are unique to doing that. That's different than, for example, painting for a show at a gallery.
Yeah.
So I was learning a lot of things, and I was at the same time learning to, I guess, relearning to shoot the basketball, like reconstructing my shot. And I just kept having days in the studio where like this one thing from basketball was helping me in art.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be obvious things. It would be more of a, like a philosophical approach to learning. So for
Yes.
example, I was holding my shot a certain way.
Yeah.
And it was giving me some success. I was like, okay, so whenever I shoot, I need to lock my elbow a certain way. And then for 2 weeks, it was helping me shoot better. And then it plateaued and wasn't helping me get any better. So like one of the realizations was actually like I need to abandon that or not be attached to this one thing I've learned, because if I can not do that for a second and not kind of hold it as gospel for a second and try this other thing, I actually learned that, oh, actually, no, it's not holding the elbow this way. It's because it's something else.
Yeah.
And that process of unlearning or being reminded that whatever you discover in the moment is just for that moment. It might get you to the next place, but it's not. Just because it was successful for a couple of shots or a week or two doesn't mean that it's something you have to hold on to and be like, okay, I have to draw this way because it was successful. So that's just an example of how like learning something completely different and just thinking about the process of learning
Yeah.
really continues to help. Some days I'll come back to the studio after being frustrated by painting and be like, oh, like something about basketball helped me, you know, figure out what to do next. Not figure out how to draw, but figure out, okay, maybe my next step is to draw this picture again. My next step is to, do this. It just opens doors. So I don't know if that is off on a tangent. But
No, that's perfect because it's making me think of some things. So I used to read this blog called The Great Discontent, and it's kind of about like what we as artists have, where it's never perfect. We're always discontented in some way, and I think from a mental health standpoint, maybe it's not the best, but at the same time, is what keeps us growing and progressing. So like, for instance, you look at the best basketball players, like LeBron or whatever, they're still in the gym trying to figure things out, working, doing the same boring drills over and over again because they're trying to figure something out that they can do better. And I think with us as artists, the artists that tend to keep going with this anyway, they find a way to like keep changing and evolving. They don't think, oh, I've got it figured out, I'm done, I'm just gonna do the same thing, like whatever. We're always learning. So I think you're onto something there.
I hope so.
I think so. I picked it up anyway. Stay woke, folks.
No,
Oops. Blooper roll.
just slowly dismantling this joint.
My bad. Question. Do you have a favorite children's book author?
Do I have a favorite children's book author? It's hard to name one. For a long time, I was very influenced by this Belgian author-illustrator. Their name is Kitty Crowther.
Yeah.
And the book that she wrote, or the books that she works on, don't really have a plot.
Okay.
Actually, they do have a plot. One of the books that she did was called Stories of the Night, and they take the fairy tale form.
Yep.
Very much consciously. It happens in the forest once upon a time. It's getting dark.
Yeah.
And then the moment that you're anticipating where the villain comes or something bad happens, it never happens. But it's interesting enough to keep you strung along.
Yeah.
And it was released, I think 2018. I might be wrong, but it was in a particular political moment, 2018. And I felt it was, I've never confirmed this, but I as a reader interpreted that it must be intentional, that in this contentious, polarized, moment in our world, someone decided that they were not going to put any more negativity or conflict into books, just as an experiment. I don't mean that we should all stop having conflict in the book, but it was an experiment as to the possibilities of what stories could be told when taking one chunk out of storytelling, which is, if we've all learned the plot triangle with the beginning and climax and resolution, what if I just did not have this one element? Can I still tell in a story that still becomes that still fits the mold of a fairy tale, and it was very successful. So that's just one of the examples, but I'm always seeking out things that are a little different.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because then I'll do, a similar thing, but just to expand the possibilities of what can be a children's book.
Huh. See, I'm on the fence with stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm learning to like I find people like we need that closure, but I'm actually really starting to like appreciate that too because that's real life. Like
Yeah.
there is no like the good guys win at the end or whatever or the whatever. It's just things just continue.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when stories can do that and captivate you well and like enough that you feel still satiated.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, do you tend to like nerd out about a specific artist, or are you following an author, I guess, for the content, or are you following an artist? And I know there are obviously the overlaps, or maybe you do both. I don't know.
I think I have kind of children's book illustrators and authors of the moment. Like I'll be the same way as anybody else, just obsess over a particular artist for a certain period of time.
Okay.
For a while, I was really into a Japanese author illustrator. Her name is Akiko Miyakoshi.
Yeah.
I have some books on the shelf there, and just really gorgeous, luscious black and white drawing in the books that she made. But I also, over time, have been conscious to less and less look at solely picture books as my inspiration. I think just as kind of a kind of general statement, if I'm a children's book illustrator or painter, the diet of inspiration I have is other children's books, or the painter's diet of inspiration is other paintings, then you're working within what's already established and available. So I take a whole lot from film, music, and theater, books that are novels written for adults, and try to bring that all in to children's books. So I can have my kind of children's book author illustrators crushes for the moment, but I try not to be like them, like, oh, I want to figure out exactly how they do it, I want to emulate how they're doing it. I kind of stop myself at that point and say, what I'm going to put into my work should come from kind of a broader range of influences so that it becomes something that's my own.
Yeah, I think that's great advice actually for emerging artists sometimes, because a lot of times that's their approach, particularly folks that are very, very new, but they have a talent. Like their first thing to do is to find a style or someone that they like, and they just do that thing. And it's like, it's going to be more interesting for you to consume other things and then apply that talent you have in its own way and let it do its own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly went through that phase of reading only children's books.
Yeah.
Probably nobody should be looking at my back history for library loans, because there would be like 100 books all overdue. I think it's certainly valid to have that period where you want to feel like you know the medium first.
Yes.
I know the rules of children's books. I know what's out there. I know how the story is typically constructed.
Yeah.
And then after you've had that for a while, to then just remember that you can, to have the confidence that you're like, okay, I've done the work. I can start branching out. I can start doing things that I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's both parts. It's remembering to do the work and then remembering that you've done enough work. It's time to start exploring on your own path.
Right. And Richie mentioned he like loves children's books, and I think that's Richie, one of our producers, just so few folks to know. And I think that's why they're so interesting, because they are bringing in adult content without making it adult content.
Right.
And you don't know that if you don't understand it. So that's brilliant. So is there a particular work that you're most proud of?
Well, I mean, it's usually the most recent thing. So the reason why these are on the wall, this is a book that I illustrated, written by an author named James Howe. Okay. And it's a book about the cellist Yo-Yo Ma. And this was the first time I had illustrated something without writing it. So it was really challenging. It was really, yeah, there's a lot of struggles. I'm proud of this. In general, though, if I'm thinking about books that have are out in the world that I've made, I find it kind of hard to actually think about the books in their writing and their illustrating. Like if I get into it, I just start looking at things I would have changed.
Of course.
You know, mistakes, the fact that I'm hopefully a better drawer now than I am before, and just like, and nothing's, you know, satisfactory when I look at it.
Yeah.
So it's when I look at those books, I more think about the places that they've brought me. Like I've gone and read my books in libraries from coast to coast in Canada and the United States, and I think I'm most proud of the connections I've made and the relationships I made with my other artists and editors and my publishers along the way.
Yeah.
You know, there's always conflict along the way. I remember this one book I was working on, and you know, myself and the editor and the art director, so you know, we all loved the book, the direction it was headed. But during the kind of last crunch of it, final when I'm making the final art and it gets the final design, there were just a lot of you know, productive conflict. But it was hard. You know, one person thought this way and another thought it would be better the other way, and it started getting a little bit tense. And my editor told me, like, you know, in my experience, every book reaches this stage at some point. And the reason it is because it's a creative profession, and you know, if you're lucky, everyone will be equally invested and feel strongly about the book.
Yeah.
And because it's so subjective, you're naturally going to disagree about certain things. It's hard for everyone just to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And it's a sign of the fact that everyone cares so much.
Yes.
And when she told me that, it just really helped me understand why, you know, even in the future, even if I run into that, you know, final crunch, everything's tense period of time, to just know that that's normal, and that's a sign of everyone's heart in the right place. And so I think the thing I'm most proud of looking at the books I've made is hopefully that with each book, it's helped make me slightly kinder, slightly wiser as a person, and that's you know, kind of more what I take away from it. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I love that. There's definitely those moments where you're, as a designer for me, where I'm just like, I think I know what I'm doing. I've got it figured out, and then they come in and something at the end, and you're like, ah. But if you step back, sometimes it's like they're pushing you to evolve it. And then sometimes it comes back and you're like, you know what? I'm glad they did that. Now we're in a better place. So
yeah, it's funny though. I'm thinking of I got steered by the algorithm into Instagram. The designer.
Oh yeah.
Like, where's this like designer memes?
But pressing placement.
But yeah, it's seeing that you know, even if someone's giving you feedback as a client to a designer, that seeing that well, for one thing, they're not giving it to you just out of criticism. It's because it means so much to them that after your work is complete, it's going to be the thing that represents them as a brand, as a person. So it means a heck of a lot to them.
Exactly.
So it can be very challenging and you know, even a bit of friction, but it's such a great learning experience of life, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I feel like we've kind of covered this question in a lot of ways. Like, I was going to ask you about the creative force that motivates you, but is there one? Or like I what makes you keep creating? Because you probably know a lot of people that dropped out of this industry. I know a lot. Like, what is it that keeps you going?
Right. I think what keeps me or anyone working as an artist versus what keeps me or anyone being a working artist is like two different things. I think when it comes to like just, you know, what keeps me going as an artist, I don't think anything particular. It's just kind of like a compulsion.
Yeah.
I think one way somebody might discover they're an artist is that like they're just constantly clicking save on the experience of life as they're living it.
Yes.
Just like every thought they have is just like, instead of just like letting it go through one side to the other, like, I gotta save this somehow and make it profound and meaningful. Not that the things are profound and meaningful, but just like you're constantly like, basically like a type of mental hoarding.
Yeah, collect.
So that's, even if I wasn't a children's book author and working as one, I don't think I've ever stopped waking up in the morning and being like, oh, like this can be art, something I've encountered throughout the day. Having said that, we do have an active choice about what we choose as our discipline, our medium, what we devote our energies and our skills toward, the right messages that we want to send. And what really excites me about children's books is that I'd like to think of it as possibly providing a younger person, a young reader, like a first formative, like seminal aesthetic experience. It might be the first time that they've seen a painting that like made them feel a certain way, and they're like, I've never encountered that feeling before, and they might not be able to put it in words, but they may be able to remember years later that like when someone's like, oh, do you like art? It's like, I'm not sure, but I really like, this book. That is art. And that's a notion that drives me a lot in the studio.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I'm working on a book and on a certain illustration, I'm like, I'm going to make this like nuanced visual metaphor, in this book. One way I can think about it, if I'm having a tough time making that work, is like, oh, it's just like a children's book. What do kids care about metaphors anyway? Like, it doesn't matter. But instead, I'm kind of grabbed by this idea of, well, what if I keep working at it and I'm successful in making this visual metaphor?
Yeah.
And what if a child reads it and actually gets it? That might be the first time they've ever encountered visual metaphor.
Yeah.
So like that not that is a reality, but that's kind of the goal that kind of I strive towards, is not to cut any corners just because you can say, oh, it's for kids, and they'll be happy with just being entertained, or they'll be happy with, you don't have to try that hard with it. I'm really grabbed by this idea that I'm actively trying to put out the best that I can into the book because it might matter.
Man, I love hearing that, like, because there's one thing you learn when you're around with kids is they just want to be taken seriously. And to hear that you're taking them seriously when you're creating the work that's great to hear. Love that.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, like I love to just talk to them like normal, like I would talk to anyone, and they appreciate it. Like they just, oh, you listen to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. So you and I both come from a ways. Came to NASCAD, we ended up staying here. Yeah. So what is it about creating and working in Nova Scotia that like is special for you?
Right.
How does it impact your work?
Yeah. Oh, I'm not sure how it impacts my work, because I think we are just the product of our environment.
Yeah.
So I'm sure every bit of my work is somehow impacted by it. I just don't know how exactly.
Right.
But I can, given the platform, just muse a little bit about my love for this place. So I came to Nova Scotia in 2010 to attend NASCAD University, and before coming here, came in like February for a portfolio day at NASCAD.
Okay.
It was just my first time coming to Halifax, trying to suss out the school, but also see if this is a place I want to live. And I was couch surfing with a host, and my host, she suggested, oh, you should check out Daryl's restaurant. You know Daryl's?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll check that out. And I think she was somewhere in Dalhousie area, and I just started taking a walk. She just said it was close to a grocery store.
Yeah.
I didn't have data on my phone or even a map back then. I just walked. I walked quite a bit. I don't know how far I actually walked, if I made it from North End to South End, or South End to North End. I don't know how far I walked, but like I covered a lot of ground, and I never found Daryl's.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, I think like 7 months from that point to when I was accepted to school. I'm moving to Nova Scotia. I'd gotten a sublet sight unseen off Kijiji, and it happened to be Fenwick Tower. And so I'm dropped off first day at Fenwick Tower, and what should I see across the street from where I'm living but Daryl's restaurant?
That's great.
And ever since then, I've felt that this place, Halifax, Tuktuk, Nova Scotia, Mogi, has really been unfolding itself to me, and I feel lucky enough that I was in the right place in my life to be unfolded too. I guess it's really the first time in my life that I've wanted to get to know every corner of a certain place. I'm certainly not there yet. We actually, my wife and I went camping in the Windsor area, and we just drove through a couple of roads that we hadn't been through before, and we're like, we're just continuing to cover all that ground. And considering that there was a certain time in my life when I thought I was going to be a little bit more nomadic. That was what I was destined to be, not tied to a specific place. I didn't actually know until I got here and started exploring that I needed to be connected to the land and to a place and to a home. I didn't know that until I got here. And it's reflected in my work in one way. My first book, called When You Can Swim, has scenes that are inspired from, in my mind, it's not, when the reader reads it, it might not be specific, but I know where I took the inspiration from each scene. And it's everywhere from the southwestern tip in Yarmouth all the way up to Meat Cove in Cape Breton on the north. So again, I didn't know that that's what I wanted in my life, to know a place intimately, until I got here.
Beautiful. So last question, what does having this award mean to you?
So the Emerging Artist Recognition Award from Arts Nova Scotia is really meaningful in multiple ways. I hope I've covered a little bit about what it means for it to be from this province, from some of the people here that, from NASCAD, where I met so many people that I admire and who helped me on my journey. But one of the things that's meaningful about the award is that it's an Emerging Artist Award. Because when I graduated from art school, I didn't go directly into the arts. I spent a lot of time doing other things, thinking not to pursue art as a career. And then once I started thinking about it, still kind of finding my voice and my path. And the Emerging Artist Award, and the way that it's not specific to age or doesn't follow a specific timeline. You don't have to be on a certain pace to hit your marks. I just felt like that award category expresses it expresses an act of patience towards artists who are still finding their way. Yeah. It's almost like the award is saying, you can be lost in the desert. You can kind of be the prodigal child and kind of, take time finding your way. Yeah. But once you've arrived, we'll be there to witness your arrival and your emergence. So it just means a lot for me that award is there to kind of witness and bear witness to this journey at this point. And so it means a lot.
That's well deserved, I gotta say.
Thank you so much.
And I'm new to your work. I'm like, again, this is the great thing about doing this series, is there's so many people, I feel like I'm under a rock, and I'm just like, doing all this amazing stuff all the time. But so, congratulations.
No, thank you so much.
Is there anything else we didn't cover you'd like to get into?
My wife Ainsley said I had to mention her at some point, and I don't think I have.
You mentioned the traveling with her.
I think she was half kidding.
Yo, shout out to Ainsley. That's what I'm saying, is my day one.
We'll shout her out at some point in the ceremony.
There you go. Thank you for listening to Art Pays Me. Hit me up on socials at Art Pays Me pretty much everywhere, and let me know what you think. I love connecting with listeners. If you're an artist looking for clothes that speak to the creative lifestyle, check out artpaysme.com. And don't forget, visit artsns.ca for more information about the Creative Nova Scotia Awards. Peace.